Hello, I'm Beryl Exley. I'm a Professor of English Curriculum and Literacies Education with the EDGI Research Group at Griffith University in Australia. The paper I'm going to be talking about today is Children's Pedagogic Rights in a Web 2.0 Era. I'm going to be focusing on the experiences of one 8-year-old child travel blogger and the enactment of his pedagogic rights. My interest in children's education stems from the United Nations Rights of the Child. But what Bernstein offers is a way of thinking about what are the pedagogical rights within a teaching and learning context. We're very aware of the widespread take-up of education for young children, and I think of this as a very institutionalised experience. And what I wanted to do was cast Bernstein's heuristic of pedagogic rights and think about what that means for the outcomes of schooling. Okay, so Bernstein proposes 3 pedagogic rights. I say proposes because when he first developed the idea of the pedagogic rights, he hadn't actually theorised how they happened. He didn't draw on empirical data to inductively or deductively produce the theoretical framework. So I'm thinking of his pedagogic rights as a heuristic, as a rule of thumb about what children can expect as their rights from being involved in institutionalised education. So Bernstein proposed that there were 3 pedagogical rights: the rights to individual enhancement, the right to social inclusion, and the right to political participation. So I'll talk about each of those in turn. Okay, the first pedagogic right is the right to individual enhancement. This is where an individual has a right to expand their personal horizons via new access to critical understandings. The achievement of individual enhancement requires boundaries of disciplinary knowledge to be experienced as tension points. Whilst knowledge is collective information, the right to individual enhancement operates at the level of the personal, providing the individual with the potential of confidence. Okay, the second pedagogical right is the right to social inclusion. This talks to an individual's right to be included socially, intellectually, culturally, and personally, including the right to be autonomous. The right to social inclusion operates at the level of society, providing the potential for people who experience periods of transition together. In current discourses, a greater emphasis is given to the notion of diversity as a resource. The third pedagogic right is the right to political participation. This is the right to participate in civic debate and practices that have outcomes in society, that is, to participate in the construction, maintenance, and transformation of social order. An effective democracy needs people to have a stake in society, to receive what is at stake via rights, and to contribute to what is at stake via a sense of obligation. The right of political participation operates at the level of polity. So I'm going to refer now to a paper that I had published with a colleague by the name of Linda Willis. This particular publication is available on the URL listed below. So the case study we're going to look at today is based on a set of archives of travel blogs posted by an 8-year-old travel blogger. The 8-year-old child gave himself the pseudonym of Bob the Great. Bob the Great travelled around Australia for 170 days with his family in a caravan, and he logged 56 blogs that covered 11,000 words and 150 visual images. The EDGI blog site was open to the world, and Bob the Great had a visitor widget and a world map widget on his travel blog. It showed that Bob the Great had 1,000 visitors from around the world that were unknown to him. He also had a handful of pre-approved blog participants who were known to him, and these were mainly his class teacher, his class back at his regular school, his grandparents who blogged almost every day, and some other children that he knew through his father's cousin who was a teacher in England as well. What I'm going to do now is actually walk through some examples of where we could see where Bob the Great was actually engaged with the pedagogic rights of individual enhancement, social inclusion, and political participation. So in terms of Bob the Great's pedagogic right of individual enhancement, we've got a slide here that shows one of his posts. It was the posts when Bob the Great and his family visited Wards Canyon in the Northern Territory. This is what Bob the Great wrote. Wards Canyon is a spectacular place and home to very rare king ferns. We walked in the amphitheatre and it was freezing cold because there's only a small crack for the air to escape, and when you whistle it bounces back at you as it adds a different sound. The analysis that we reported on in the Exley and Willis paper identified that 80% of the posts contain evidence of Bob the Great's individual enhancement. In relation to the slide that I'm showing you now, Bob the Great showed his newly acquired knowledge about airflow and sound travel in confined spaces. This was new knowledge for Bob the Great, and he shared the knowledge in his blog post. In relation to Bob the Great's evidence of social inclusion, I've included a slide here. Bob the Great said that we had a look at Sydney Cove where Captain Cook first landed in 1788. We went to Mrs. Macquarie's chair because in The Terrible Thing That Happened to Barnaby Brockett, a book that a friend had given him for his birthday last year, Barnaby lived in Sydney and one of the main events took place at Mrs. Macquarie's chair. The analysis undertaken by Exley and Willis identified that 96% of the posts contain evidence of Bob the Great's social inclusion. So in addition to the people that Bob the Great talks about in this slide, we can also see social inclusion in the blogosphere. One of Bob the Great's school friends posted of his own experiences in Sydney and asked a question about the name of one of the beaches. The school friend also asked Bob the Great when he was returning to school and closed with a "see you soon." Multi-user virtual environments are known to produce the space and the capacity for talking about social interaction and participating in social interaction. Evidence of the third pedagogic right, that of political participation, is contained within this slide. Bob the Great writes that today was great because we only had to travel a short distance to Yulara Resort, the caravan park close to Uluru and Katajuda. In this blog, I will only use Yulara and Katajuda instead of Ayers Rock and the Olgas as a sign of respect to the Aboriginal custodians of the land. After we parked the van, we decided to go on 2 walks at Katajuda. This was one of 39% of the posts contained within Bob the Great's travel blog that evidence political participation. One external participant's comment was posted. This comment was approximately 4 lines in length, commencing with a point of connection and then moving into a recount about the external participant's own holidays in the Alice Springs. Specifically, the external participant wrote, "Your mention of distances reminds me that when we are staying at Alice Springs, something happened." In this response, the adult external participant does not continue Bob the Great's political participation. Instead, this post and every other response posted to an entry coded as political participation steers clear of the political conversation started by Bob the Great. We take up this point in the concluding statements of our publication. So moving Bernstein's heuristic of pedagogic rights into an analytic framework enabled us to make 3 significant findings. The first finding was the interplay of the 3 pedagogic rights. The blog posts were very rarely mutually exclusive. We found that there was an intersection of the 3 pedagogic rights within the blog posts. The second finding was the disproportionate attention to each of the 3 pedagogic rights. Social inclusion accounted for 96% of the posts, individual enhancement accounted for 80% of the posts, and political participation accounted for 39% of the posts. Social media researcher David Buckingham reminds us that much of young children's use of digital technology is mundane rather than spectacular. It is characterised not by dramatic manifestations of innovation and creativity, but by relatively routine forms of communication and information retrieval. The third finding was the active but seemingly sanitised role of adult commentators, especially when Bob the Great was moving into the political participation right. Our findings are that there is a disruption of the almost utopian view of multi-user virtual spaces as liberating and empowering. So this published work has shown the utility of Bernstein's heuristic of pedagogic rights and the benefit of taking the heuristic of pedagogic rights into an analytic framework. Those of you who are interested in exploring educational transmission and the institution of pedagogic rights through institutionalized education are encouraged to look into the theory that supports the development of this analysis. Thank you very much.